What if everything you thought you knew about ancient history and religion was only part of the story? What if some of the most important truths were hidden away in the dry, crumbling caves near the Dead Sea, discovered by accident, yet carefully guarded ever since? These ancient scrolls, known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, contain texts so powerful, so mysterious, that even today, many of them remain shrouded in secrecy, guarded by institutions, and whispered about by scholars. This is not just history. This is a window into a world that challenges everything we've been told about faith, power, and the human story. In this video, we are going to uncover what the Dead Sea Scrolls really say, why certain parts were kept hidden from the public, and what truths lie within these ancient texts that they don't want you to know. The Dead Sea Scrolls are one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. They were first found in 1947 by a young Bedouin shepherd who stumbled upon a cave near the shores of the Dead Sea while searching for a lost goat. Inside the cave, he found ancient clay jars containing scrolls wrapped in linen. These scrolls would go on to change our understanding of biblical history. Over the next decade, more caves were explored, and eventually 11 caves were discovered, filled with over 900 texts, written mostly on parchment and papyrus. Some of the scrolls were in near-perfect condition, others were fragmented and damaged, but all of them were old, incredibly old, dating back over 2,000 years to around 150 BCE to 70 CE. The scrolls are written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and they include a wide range of content. Some are copies of books from the Hebrew Bible, including Genesis, Isaiah, Psalms, and Deuteronomy. Others are texts that were never included in the official Bible, such as the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees. There are also community rules, commentaries on Scripture, prophetic visions, and apocalyptic writings that describe battles between light and darkness, good and evil, angels and demons. Scholars believe that a Jewish sect called the Essenes may have been responsible for writing or preserving these scrolls. The Essenes were a mysterious group who lived in isolation, away from Jerusalem and mainstream Jewish society. They followed strict rules of purity, believed in the coming of a Messiah or even multiple Messiahs, and waited for a final cosmic battle that would end the current age and usher in a new divine kingdom. The Essenes rejected the corruption they saw in the religious leadership of their time, and they believed they were the true faithful remnant of Israel. The scrolls were hidden away, possibly during times of war or Roman persecution, and left untouched for nearly 2,000 years until their rediscovery in the mid-20th century. What makes the Dead Sea Scrolls so important is that they represent the oldest known surviving copies of biblical texts, older than any previously discovered manuscripts by almost 1,000 years. They provide a glimpse into the diversity of Jewish thought and belief during a critical period in history, just before and during the rise of Christianity. These scrolls are not just religious documents, they are historical treasures that reveal how people lived, what they believed, and how they saw their place in the universe. They offer alternative interpretations of sacred texts. They show disagreements, evolving doctrines, and spiritual struggles that were happening in ancient communities. And most intriguingly, they raise questions about why certain texts were preserved, while others were lost, forgotten, or possibly suppressed. Among the hundreds of scrolls discovered in the caves near the Dead Sea, many contain writings that have never appeared in the modern Bible. These hidden or suppressed texts include works like the Book of Enoch, the War Scroll, the Community Rule, and several mysterious psalms and apocalyptic prophecies that challenge the traditional view of Scripture. The Book of Enoch, for example, describes a cosmic battle between fallen angels and divine beings. It speaks of watchers, celestial creatures who descend to earth and corrupt humanity, teaching forbidden knowledge and bringing chaos to the world. This ancient story was once widely read and respected in early Jewish and Christian circles. Yet over time, It was removed from most religious canons, and today, few people even know it exists. The War Scroll paints a vivid picture of the end times. It describes a final battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, where divine forces and evil armies collide in a brutal, apocalyptic war. It is not a metaphorical or symbolic battle. It is detailed, strategic, and militaristic, suggesting that the authors of this scroll truly believed they were living in the final days, preparing for a real conflict that would reshape the world. It reveals a mindset of spiritual warfare that is much more intense than what we see in most traditional religious teachings today. The community rule is another scroll that outlines the strict regulations followed by the sect who preserved these writings, believed to be the Essenes. This text details how members of the community had to purify themselves, reject worldly pleasures, and commit to a life of discipline and obedience. It speaks of secret knowledge, hidden wisdom, and a path to righteousness that separates the chosen few from the rest of humanity. The scroll implies that salvation is not for everyone, but only for those who follow the sacred code and live according to divine order. Other texts found among the scrolls include alternate versions of biblical stories, psalms that are not in the Book of Psalms, and interpretations of Scripture that dramatically differ from what most modern readers would recognize. Some fragments even mention mysterious figures like Melchizedek, described as a heavenly being who plays a messianic role in the end times. This portrayal stands in contrast to traditional teachings and opens up entirely new ways of understanding ancient messianic expectations. Many scholars and researchers have long suspected that some of these texts were deliberately kept from the public, not just because they were incomplete or difficult to translate, but because their content could challenge religious authority. Their messages are radical, revealing a different vision of divine justice, a more cosmic struggle between good and evil, and a deeper connection between humanity and the divine realm. These writings suggest that early religious thought was far more complex, mystical, and controversial than the sanitized versions presented in modern religious institutions. There are even claims from insiders that access to certain scrolls was restricted for decades, especially during the early years of their discovery. Some scrolls remained unpublished or untranslated, locked away in private collections or controlled by select scholars. This control over knowledge has fueled suspicion that powerful institutions may have wanted to keep some of these messages from reaching the wider public, because if people began to question what was included in the Bible, they might also begin to question why other writings were excluded, and who had the authority to decide what counted as truth. These hidden texts open the door to a much larger and more mysterious story, one that invites us to look beyond the official version of history and explore the ancient voices that were silenced, forgotten, or buried in the desert for centuries, waiting for someone to find them and ask the question, what were they trying to tell us, and why was it kept hidden for so long? One of the most fascinating and controversial aspects of the Dead Sea Scrolls is how many of their teachings and revelations appear to contradict mainstream religious beliefs. These contradictions are not small differences in language or translation. They are deep and fundamental challenges to the foundations of modern organized religion. For example, the scrolls present a vision of multiple messiahs, not just one. Some texts speak of a priestly messiah and a kingly messiah, suggesting that salvation was not expected to come from a single divine figure, but rather through a partnership between spiritual and political leaders. This idea directly opposes the Christian belief in Jesus as the one and only Messiah, and it raises important questions about how messianic prophecy was originally understood. Another contradiction lies in the view of divine judgment and the end times. Mainstream religion often emphasizes grace, forgiveness, and a universal opportunity for salvation. Yet the Dead Sea Scrolls present a much more exclusive vision. In many of the texts, the world is sharply divided between the righteous and the wicked, the sons of light and the sons of darkness. and only those who strictly follow divine law are considered worthy of redemption. There is little room for mercy or personal interpretation. Salvation is not about belief alone, but about obedience to a strict code in separation from a corrupt world. The role of angels and spiritual beings is also vastly different in the scrolls compared to mainstream teachings. In traditional religious texts, angels are messengers or protectors, but in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they are active participants in a cosmic war. Some are even portrayed as leaders of armies or judges over humanity. This deeper integration of angelic forces into the drama of human history suggests a much more complex and mystical understanding of the spiritual realm, one that has largely been left out of modern religious teachings. There are also significant differences in how Scripture itself is interpreted. The scrolls include commentaries that reread and reinterpret biblical stories in ways that are unfamiliar or even shocking. For example, some texts suggest that key biblical figures had secret roles or hidden knowledge that was never shared with the public. These interpretations challenge the idea that Scripture is fixed and unchangeable. They imply that there were multiple traditions, multiple ways of understanding divine truth, and that some of these have been lost or suppressed over time. Even the concept of God is presented in ways that differ from mainstream belief. In many scrolls, God is described as a being of immense mystery and power, often distant and unknowable, rather than the personal and loving figure promoted by many modern faiths. This reflects a more ancient and awe-filled approach to the divine, one that emphasizes reverence, fear, and hidden knowledge, rather than a simple relationship based on love and worship. Some of the scrolls even hint at female aspects of the divine, or refer to wisdom as a feminine presence that existed alongside God. This stands in contrast to the male-dominated images of divinity found in most religious traditions, and opens the door to a more balanced or alternative understanding of sacred power. These contradictions have not gone unnoticed. They raise difficult questions for theologians, pastors, and religious institutions, because if the Dead Sea Scrolls contain original or older versions of sacred beliefs that differ so strongly from what is taught today, then what does that say about the authority of modern religion? Who decided which version of the truth would survive? And why were other voices silenced? For many, the scrolls are a reminder that religion has always been shaped by human hands, guided by councils, traditions, and politics, and that the truth may be more diverse, mysterious, and complex than we have been led to believe. The contradictions found in these ancient texts are not meant to destroy faith, but to challenge us to think more deeply, to ask harder questions, and to seek a deeper connection with the divine beyond what has been approved and accepted by traditio. So why is it that certain texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls were hidden for so long? Why were some of them not translated, not published, or even locked away from the public for decades? To understand this, we have to look at who benefits from keeping such knowledge in the shadows, and what it would mean if the truth these scrolls reveal became widely known. The answer is not simple, but it often comes down to power, control, and the preservation of established authority. For centuries, religious institutions have held a central role in shaping how people understand the world, how they view morality, spirituality, and even the purpose of life itself. Their teachings are built on carefully selected texts, ones that support a unified and controlled message. Introducing new or ancient writings that contradict this message could shake the very foundations of that authority. If people begin to question what has been left out, they might start questioning everything else as well. Imagine a world where millions of people suddenly realize that the version of religious truth they have been taught is incomplete, that sacred knowledge was deliberately hidden, that alternative visions of the divine were excluded from their education. This would not only create confusion, it would challenge the influence of churches, religious leaders, and even governments that have used religion as a tool for order and obedience. People might begin to look for spiritual answers outside traditional institutions, and that is something those in power do not want. The idea of secret knowledge is not new. Throughout history, mystical traditions, esoteric schools, and hidden sects have always believed that there are truths too dangerous or too powerful for the general public. They believed such truths could awaken the mind, transform the soul, and empower individuals to see through illusion and manipulation. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain fragments of this ancient wisdom, and if more people had access to it, they might begin to reclaim their spiritual independence. There are also academic and political reasons behind this oppression. When the scrolls were first discovered, access to them was tightly controlled by a small group of scholars. Some argue this was done to protect the documents from misinterpretation, but others believe it was to prevent the public from drawing their own conclusions, because these texts do not align with official doctrine, and their publication could lead to theological chaos. By keeping control over the scrolls, these scholars and institutions could maintain their authority over the narrative. In addition, religious institutions may fear that these scrolls reveal their own historical inconsistencies, contradictions, or manipulation of sacred texts. If people realize that certain teachings were edited, removed, or altered over time, trust in those institutions would begin to erode. Followers might start to wonder what else has been kept from them, and whether the path they were taught to follow is truly the only way. There is also the concern of power structures losing influence. Many governments throughout history have relied on religion to create unity, obedience, and order among the population, a spiritually awakened society. One that questions everything and seeks knowledge on its own can be harder to control. The truths hidden in the Dead Sea Scrolls may not only empower individuals spiritually, but also inspire them to think critically, to challenge authority, and to search for a deeper meaning in life beyond what they have been told. Ultimately, the suppression of these scrolls is not just about religion. It is about maintaining control over human thought, belief, and identity. When ancient voices rise from the desert with stories that defy the official version, they pose a threat to systems built on conformity and blind trust, and that is why they do not want you to know, because once you start asking questions, once you see the cracks in the foundation, you begin to wake up, and waking up is the greatest danger to any system that thrives on silence and obedience. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Dead Sea Scrolls is how many of their ideas seem to echo ancient knowledge from other civilizations and spiritual traditions across the world. These connections raise deep questions about whether the people who wrote the scrolls were part of a much older and wider stream of wisdom that stretched far beyond the desert caves of Qumran, and whether this wisdom may have once been shared among ancient cultures before it was divided and forgotten over time. For example, the dualistic themes found in the scrolls, the battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, closely resemble the teachings of Zoroastrianism, an ancient Persian religion that also spoke of a great cosmic struggle between good and evil, light and darkness. This similarity suggests that the writers of the scrolls may have been influenced by, or even directly connected to, Eastern traditions that predated or paralleled early Judaism. It hints at a time when spiritual ideas were not confined to one religion or one land, but moved freely across borders, shaping beliefs in many different places. The scrolls also speak of secret knowledge, hidden teachings, and esoteric wisdom meant only for the initiated. This concept mirrors the mystery schools of ancient Egypt and Greece, where select individuals were trained in sacred knowledge about the soul, the afterlife, and the nature of the divine. In these ancient schools, truth was seen as something powerful, something to be revealed slowly to those who were prepared to receive it. And that same attitude is present in the Dead Sea Scrolls, where certain truths are encoded in symbolism, metaphors, and coded language. Some texts even reference ancient figures or themes that feel far older than biblical tradition, including mentions of angelic hierarchies, pre-creation battles, and visions of cosmic order. These elements resonate with the Book of Enoch, a text found alongside the scrolls, but excluded from the Bible. The Book of Enoch itself is filled with parallels to Sumerian, Babylonian, and even early Hindu cosmology, suggesting a shared understanding of the heavens, the divine, and humanity's place in the universe that spans many civilizations. Furthermore, the emphasis in the scrolls on inner purification, strict discipline, and separation from the material world is similar to Eastern philosophies such as Buddhism, which also teaches detachment from worldly distractions and a path toward enlightenment through personal transformation. While the language and context are different, the spiritual goal seems remarkably aligned. It is as if these ancient peoples, though separated by geography, were all trying to answer the same eternal questions about who we are, why we are here, and how we connect to the source of all life. There are also intriguing connections to early Gnostic texts, which emerged centuries later, but carry many of the same ideas found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, such as the belief in hidden knowledge, a divine spark within humans, and the idea that the material world is a flawed or fallen creatio. Some scholars believe that the scrolls may represent an early form of proto-Gnosticism, or that both traditions emerged from an older, now lost source of spiritual truth. Even Native American and ancient African spiritual traditions speak of sky beings, lost wisdom, and sacred codes passed down through generations. Though these stories differ in form, the core message is strikingly familiar. They all point to a deeper, more mystical connection between human beings and the divine, one that is not limited by dogma or institutional control. These connections remind us that the Dead Sea Scrolls are not isolated relics of a forgotten sect. They are part of a larger puzzle, a larger story about the human search for truth. When we compare them with other ancient knowledge, a pattern begins to emerge. A map of spiritual wisdom that crosses cultures, languages, and centuries. It is a map that invites us to look beyond what we have been told, to explore the forgotten threads of humanity's sacred history, and to rediscover the deeper truths that may unite us all. Ever since the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, they have sparked intense debates among scholars, historians, and theologians around the world. Far from being a closed case, the scrolls continue to raise questions that challenge long-held beliefs, divide academic communities, and fuel controversy over what these ancient writings truly mean and how they should be interpreted. At the heart of the debate is the identity of the people who wrote the scrolls. Some scholars argue that the scrolls were written by a Jewish sect known as the Essenes, a group that lived in isolation near the Dead Sea and practiced strict religious discipline. Others believe the scrolls may have been collected from different groups, or even from the temple in Jerusalem before its destruction. This debate matters because understanding who wrote the scrolls helps us understand their purpose. Were they meant as teachings for a small group, warnings to the public, or records of sacred knowledge meant to survive the fall of a civilization? There is also disagreement over the content itself. While some scholars see the scrolls as reinforcing traditional Jewish teachings, others believe they contain radical and even revolutionary ideas that break from mainstream religio. Some texts challenge the authority of the temple priesthood. Others speak of hidden messianic figures and secret divine knowledge. The presence of texts like the Book of Enoch and the War Scroll adds fuel to the debate, because these writings are not part of the Hebrew Bible and suggest a different spiritual worldview that was later rejected or suppressed. Another source of controversy is how the scrolls were handled after their discovery. For decades, only a small circle of scholars had access to the full collection. This led to accusations of secrecy, censorship, and even conspiracy. Many believe that certain powerful institutions may have tried to slow down or control the release of information from the scrolls, fearing that the content could disrupt religious beliefs or academic narratives. Although most of the scrolls have now been made public, the shadow of that early secrecy still shapes how people view the entire discovery. Translation is another major issue. Ancient languages like Hebrew and Aramaic are complex, and their meaning can shift depending on context. Small differences in how a word is translated can completely change the meaning of a passage. Scholars often argue over the best way to interpret certain key terms or phrases. Some interpretations support traditional theology, while others suggest hidden meanings or lost traditions that challenge what we think we know about ancient religion. There are also political and ideological tensions within the academic world itself. Some scholars want to preserve the authority of established religious narratives, while others are more open to alternative or even controversial ideas. This clash of perspectives often leads to heated arguments in academic journals, conferences, and public debates. Sometimes it is not just about what the scrolls say, but about who gets to decide what is considered truth. In recent years, technology has allowed for new discoveries and re-examinations. Advanced imaging techniques have revealed hidden text on scroll fragments. Digital archives have made the scrolls more accessible to researchers and the public, and new generations of scholars are bringing fresh perspectives. Yet even with these advances, the debate continues because the scrolls touch on fundamental questions about faith, history, and the very roots of human spirituality. What makes the Dead Sea Scrolls so powerful is not just what they contain, but the fact that they remain alive in the minds of those who study them. They are not silent relics from the past. They are voices still speaking, still challenging, still asking us to look deeper into what we believe and why. And as long as questions remain unanswered, the debate will continue, shaping our understanding of ancient wisdom and the hidden truths of human history. Today, in a world filled with constant noise, distraction, and confusion about what is true and what is false, the story of the Dead Sea Scrolls reminds us how powerful knowledge can be, not just the knowledge that is handed down through official channels, but the hidden knowledge, the forgotten wisdom, the truths that were once buried in desert caves and kept from the public eye for decades. The scrolls are more than just ancient documents. They are a mirror, reflecting not only the past, but also the present and the future of our spiritual journey. They matter today because they challenge us to question, to dig deeper, and to not take everything at face value. In a time when many institutions still control what information is shared and what narratives are promoted, the scrolls stand as a symbol of something older and perhaps pure, something that was not filtered through political or religious power, but written by people seeking truth in its rawest form. Their voices echo across time, asking us to listen with open minds and courageous hearts. The fact that some parts of the scrolls were hidden, censored, or delayed in their release shows us how truth is often seen as dangerous by those who want to maintain control, and that same pattern can be seen in our modern world, where uncomfortable truths are often ignored, silenced, or twisted. The Dead Sea Scrolls invite us to look beyond the surface, to explore what lies beneath the accepted stories, to rediscover the original fire of human seeking and spiritual awakening. They also matter because they show that there was once a time when different cultures may have shared a common understanding of the divine. The scrolls connect to ancient traditions from the East and the West, from Persia to Egypt, from early Christianity to forgotten mystery schools. In doing so, they remind us that we are not as divided as we think. Beneath our modern identities and beliefs, there may be a deeper layer of unity, a shared human quest for meaning, for purpose, for connection to something greater. The scrolls speak of light and darkness, not just in the cosmic sense, but in the personal sense too. They remind us that each of us carries both, and that the journey of life is about choosing which path we walk in a world filled with distraction, illusion, and fear. The call to awaken, to seek truth, to live with integrity is more relevant than ever. And perhaps that is why they were hidden, because true wisdom empowers the individual. It cannot be controlled, sold, or weaponized in the same way as dogma or doctrine. True wisdom sets people free. It invites them to think, to reflect, to challenge what they have been taught. And that kind of freedom is a threat to any system built on control. In the end, the Dead Sea Scrolls are not just about ancient history. They are about us, here and now. They are a reminder that truth, once hidden, always finds a way to surface. And when it does, it changes everything. The question is not whether the scrolls matter, but whether we are ready to listen to what they are still trying to tell us today.